Okay. All right, so it's 4:02 p.m. on Wednesday, August 14th, 2019. And this meeting of the Civil Service Commission is hereby called to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hickman,
Here.
Vice Chairman Koss, Chairman Ripka.
Here. So Eric sent us a note this morning about an urgent matter at work, so he won't be in today. So as such, I move to excuse the absence of Mr. Koss. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have such a move by Mr. Ripka, second by Mr. Hickman. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hickman,
Aye.
Chairman Ripka.
Yes. So Mr. Koss is excused. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please read agenda item number 3 into the record.
Approval of the motion summary for the meeting held June 5th, 2019 as recorded and transcribed.
Okay, having read the motion summary in advance, does any commission member wish to initiate any further discussion? If not, do we hear a move to accept and approve the subject motion summary as recorded and transcribed?
I so move.
Okay, and I will second. We have such a move by Mr. Hickman, second by Mr. Ripka. Any final discussions? If not, roll call.
Mr. Hickman,
Aye.
Chairman Ripka.
Yes. Motion carries. Please read agenda item number 4 into the record.
Review of the revised police sergeant promotional process.
Okay, so the police sergeant promotional process was last updated on September 5th, 2012. So if you look at them side by side, at a quick glance, it looks like the process appears to contain some significant process changes. Specifically, it eliminates the shift supervision and review panel, and this is where the departmental sergeants and captains would get together with the candidate's history, take a look at accomplishments, try to measure those up against, certain desirable dimensions. That weight had 35%, so that's eliminated. The written standardized exam from a reputable third party was eliminated, and that had a weight of 35%. And it changed the composition of the oral interview panel from all external interviewers to a combination of internal and external interviewers, and that had a weight of 30%. Previously on the oral interview, it had all external, 1 sergeant, 1 lieutenant or higher rank, 1 citizen at large, 1 from the prosecutor's office, 1 senior manager from within the community, and 1 human resources type. And that's moving toward internally 3 sergeants, 1 per shift, if we have it available, 1 captain, 1 citizen at large, and 1 member from the prosecutor's office. So there's the to and from. It adds assessment center testing, and it keeps the additional points awarded unchanged. But if you take a closer look at it, it seems that the shift supervision review panel was just absorbed into the oral interview panel, and the written exam was replaced by the assessment center testing. So it looks significant when you look at the before and afters, but once you start looking at it, it's really not all that significant as I thought. So with that, Chief Pujanowski, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Chairman Ripka and members of the Civil Service Commission. I think you summarized the process. We go same eligibility, 4 years with the police department at the time the application period closes, followed by the oral interview. The oral interview comprised of 3 of our sergeants, 1 of our captains, and then 2 outside participants, a prosecutor and a citizen at large. The top 6 scores from that interview then move on to the assessment center. The assessment center will be run by a reputable third-party vendor who will come in and complete the whole process for us, provide us with the score for each participant, and once those scores are provided, the additional points will be added on to comprise the final ranking, which will be then on the list that's presented to you. I can answer any questions you have about the process, but I can tell you we went from the 2012 process to this new process based on a number of reasons, and a lot of those were concerns that were raised by the people that have gone through the process in the past. So 2012 was not the first time we did this process. It was the last iteration of this kind of scenario of how we progressed through it, and there were a number of concerns just about the length of time it took to get through it. The written test itself was problematic in what it was testing, and there were some, specific concerns about that that I thought were valid. And also some of the rankings that we had from the oral interview being an entirely outside panel. There was no kind of internal component to that might, kind of balance that out. And then the supervisory review was a kind of a closed door skull session, but there was, in that in and of itself, created concerns with, if you have one supervisor who is a little more vocal, there could be undue influence. So we did have a captain in there trying to manage that, but these were all concerns voiced by the participants of the process at the end of each process. So that was somewhat of a consistent theme, and it specifically came out after 2012. So we knew going forward, we did want to look at an assessment center. We've talked about that for a while, and this is the first opportunity. It does create consistency because we also do assessment centers for captain, assistant chief, and chief. And this does combine some of what we thought were the better things of the process. So you still have an oral interview, but it's a little bit more of an internal panel so that sergeants who have worked with the candidate will be able to evaluate their answers and understand what they're saying. And then we still have the citizen at large and the prosecutor. So there's somewhat of a legal component, but still an outside view. And the assessment center is really the big new piece, and that actually, the written test tests your knowledge, but I think the concern I had with that, it tests your knowledge about whether you specifically read the book and knew what an author said about a particular piece of information, whereas an assessment center tests your knowledge and how you apply that. So it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison, but having been through I think 4 assessment centers, I can tell you that it's not easy, and it requires preparation, and it truly tests your knowledge and how you apply that. So that's very valuable to us, because you could be the smartest person in the world, but if you don't have a delivery system, it doesn't matter. So that's where we kind of worked through several versions of this, of how it would look, and this was what we came up with. The final thing on here is that there's a note that we may use a management assessment tool, because as part of civil service rules, I have a rule 3. So we may choose to conduct an assessment as a developmental piece to aid me in those interviews of the top 3. But once we had this put together, I did have an opportunity to meet with the union and have a labor relations meeting and present the rationale for this current test. And at that meeting, they were in favor of this, but they are here now, and they were advised that they were more than welcome to be here, and if they have any concerns, they can answer any questions you may have as well.
Sure. Well, it's good of you to do so. Personally, I'm glad to see the change in the oral interview panel. So I was lucky enough to sit on a sergeant's bid. I think it was back in 2016. I was the citizen at large, and I was invited to come participate over there. And a lot of the police officers were from our neighboring communities. And after we did all of the interviews and we did our rankings and stuff like that, we had a little deliberation to get everybody on the same page. And some of our best and brightest were on that bid. They were 15, 20-year veterans over there. And I was just taken aback at how they were talking about our officers and their competencies. I was really taken back, because it wasn't very enlightening, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was in poor taste. So I'm glad to see that shift over there. And even though you made the changes based on past experience and some of the candidates that went through there, I mean, from what I've read, there's many police professionals who moved away from the 100-question, multiple choice kind of test, because it kind of rewarded the test takers. So you can be an academic and get your 100+, but when you get thrown into a real life situation, you can't find the front door. And some professions have what they call a body of knowledge. And so, like you said, you're being tested on some author's book, but some professions have a very structured body of knowledge that the whole community puts together. That would have all the best practices together, but in the absence of that, I don't know what would be the best test taking short of the assessment center. And again, those are like mini tests, but they're all behavioral, and they will test anything from conflict management to leadership to human resources and the whole scheme. And you have a chance to develop all of those with them, and the assessment center actually does the ranking. So you do the oral interviews, you take the top 6, and they go through the assessment center. You help design that whole thing over there. They get ranked. The added points go on there, and then you have the flexibility to use whatever management tools you want to roll them down to the 3. Is
Correct.
that in a nutshell? That's very good. Good. And in terms of consistency, the fire department uses assessment centers as well. The only real difference is that I think they still, at least for lieutenants and captains, do the written exam, and then you have to pass that to move on to their assessment center. And that's like 30% of the grade, and then the oral interview. No, I think the oral's 30 in the assessment center, or vice versa. Okay, so I think I got it. And the union is okay with that? Okay, everything's good to go. And again, some of these management rights to extend that invitation is commendable. So does any commission member have any further questions or comments? None whatsoever. Do I hear a move to accept and approve the subject revised police sergeant promotional process as presented?
So moved.
Okay, I will second it. We have such a move by Mr. Hickman, second by Mr. Ripka. Any final discussions? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Hickman,
Aye.
Chairman Ripka.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Does any public want to make any comments? Everybody's happy, good and dandy. All righty. Okay, so I have a tendency to talk about tidbits that I pick up as I cruise news wires and things like that. And this one has to do with both police and fire, because you both get involved on it. And it has to come from the opioid files. So under court order and against the wishes of the federal government and the drug industry, the DEA's ARCOS database was made public. This database tracks the path of every pain pill, and think oxycodone, hydrocodone, sold in the country. So according to the Washington Post, more than 76 billion oxycodone and hydrocodone pills were distributed across the country between 2006 and 2012, resulting in nearly 100 deaths. So they further take this data and bring it down to a county level, not a city, but a county. So for Delaware County, Ohio, over 41 million prescription pain pills, which is enough, I'd say enough, for 36 pills per person per year to be were supplied to Delaware County during that time. So, and that's pretty close to what these national statistics are. So the number is like 35 across the country. We came in at 36. Granted, they're inflated because of the opioid crisis. But listen to some of these other numbers. Whitley County, Kentucky, 187 pills per person per year. Mingo County, West Virginia, 203 pills per person per year. Norton, Virginia, 306 pills per person per year. So in the county, Delaware, of the 41 million, 19 million were distributed by Cardinal Health. 25 million of the 41 million were manufactured by Spec GX LLC, and 9 million of the 41 million was received by Scriptwise LLC Pharmacy in Westerville. Now the dispensaries in Delaware, whether it be Walgreens, Kroger's, they didn't have any more than 22.5 million each, but you know, this one pharmacy kind of stuck out. So if you have the federal government out there reporting all this data or looking at all this data, and it continues for this period of time, you have to ask the questions, how it happened and who's responsible. And they shouldn't be rhetorical questions by any means. So I think there's continuing research in media out on that, and we'll just see where that takes. Another interesting tidbit I read this morning has to do with suicide files. So Chief, you're probably aware of the 8th suicide of the NYPD officers up there. And I think 3 of those occurred over the span of 10 days. So there was a research study by the Rudderman Family Foundation up in Boston that talked in terms of police officers and firefighters that are more likely to die by suicide than in the line of duty, which I thought was an odd statistic. So in police officers in 2017, 140 took their lives by suicide, 129 were killed in the line of duty, and for firefighters, suicide 103, killed in line of duty 93. I thought that was a very unusual statistics. And Chief, I know you talked in June to the city council members about the suicide stuff, so I know it's on your radar, and that's a good thing. Because the study also found that of the 18,000 law enforcement agencies across the country, approximately 3 to 5% have suicide prevention training. And again, we are not New York PD, we're Delaware, Ohio, so we'll see, but it was just an amazing statistic.
It's so sad.
It is, I mean, I don't know what to say.
The statistics also are out there, 22 veterans a day across our country
That's,
are taking their lives. And
That's
they're not necessarily all young veterans who have had tour after tour after tour. A lot of these are guys older, my age, from my war. And it's just a sad state of affairs, it really is.
yeah. So those are watch items. Any further discussion? Okay, there being no further business to conduct, I move to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, we have a move by Mr. Ripka, second by Mr. Hickman. Any final discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Hickman?
Aye.
Chairman Ripka?
Aye, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all very much.
So I want to thank firefighters and FOP for donating. Your names will be permanently right across the street on the Rutherford B. Hayes